Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Monday, May 21st, 2018. We got a lot to talk about. First, let's take a look at the Southern Oscillation Index today. The number is 10.59. The 30-day has dipped in recent weeks to -2, but look at this. The 90-day average is up now to over 5.5, right? So if we look at the graph and how that's plotted, look at that trend change there. If this will scroll down for me, we had this sort of loss of the index, so to speak, like the stock market going down, and you hit rock bottom and then you come back up again. And we saw that with the 90-day, but it's much smoother. And both of the indices now, the 90-day and the 30-day, are on the increase again, and that is not a sign of El Nino. That shows us that the pressure pattern across the tropical Pacific has not connected and coupled with the ocean, so to speak, to foster continuous westerly winds and blowing the warm Pacific warm pool westward, etc. I mean, it's moderating out there, which we'll talk about in a moment, but this is not the sign of a strong El Nino or anything really resembling an El Nino of any significance coming on. We need to see these numbers significantly below zero. And remember, this is just an index. It's not really measuring anything like a temperature or whatever. It's just an index. It's like the stock market. It's just a measure of how it's doing. And it, in this case, is the pressure difference between Tahiti and Darwin out in Australia. And what this shows us is that pressures are generally lower way over in the western Pacific than they are in the eastern Pacific. And remember, pressure moves from high to low. And so the net flow of air, and this is a big oversimplification, but just trying to break it down for everybody, the net flow of air is still east to west. And we haven't reversed that very much with sustained westerly winds that would warm up the equatorial Pacific to dramatic levels like we saw in 2015 at this time. Instead, we're in a warm neutral pattern, which means that we're around zero, on the ENSO scale, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and it's probably going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. You've got patches of cooler water compared to average mixed in with these patches of warmer water, and it all equals out to basically, we're in a neutral pattern, maybe slightly warmer than neutral, some weeks slightly cooler than neutral, what we call cool neutral in other weeks. It's interesting because the anomaly chart here, we'll go back to this one. Look at the tropical Atlantic. We still have this horseshoe of cold compared to average. But I want to make something really clear, and I'm going to show you that in more detail here in a moment. Just because it's colder than average doesn't mean that the water's cold. So don't look at, not necessarily. Look at these blues in here. So maybe it is cold up here off the coast of Portugal, because the Atlantic's normally pretty cold over there, right? But down in the tropics, colder than average doesn't mean that it's, 55 degrees or something. This is relative to average climatology, and you have a period of time that this is looking at. There's a lot of methodology behind it. So please don't confuse blue with actually meaning cold necessarily, especially when we're talking about the deep tropics down here. We've had a little bit of a rebound, but overall the main development region is much cooler than it was this time last year, and you see this very obvious large continent-sized area of positive anomalies, warmer than normal. And so that's probably going to change the hurricane season so that it does not resemble what we had last year. But what difference does it make? Even if we knew what was coming last year, how much more could we do? These seasonal forecasts are helpful to one degree, not helpful to the extent that they don't tell us when, where, and how bad. So we look at this and we say, okay, we're going to have a different type of hurricane season, probably, and you got to be careful, you never say never, probably not going to have a lot of development in this area that we track for weeks, well, not weeks, but days to almost 2 weeks at a time. I'm worried that we're going to see a lot of development in this area, much closer to home. And home is for a lot of people. The islands, yeah. I mean, if things start to pop closer to you, or Bermuda, or we get something that develops kind of like Irene did in 2011, kind of early or late in the game, and then it came up the coast like that. You just never know. We'll talk about this more on June 1st, but as I look at this and I see people tweeting, wow, this is the coldest that I've seen the Atlantic since 1995. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's actually cold. Believe me, by August 15th, the traditional start of the Cape Verde season, so to speak, the meat of the hurricane season, roughly 45 days long, the Atlantic will be plenty warm to support tropical storms and hurricanes. That hasn't changed. Beyond that, it's a matter of how many and the other factors, dry sinking air and stuff like that. We'll talk about that more June 1st. The other point to this is there are different methodologies. This is the Reynolds method, National Hurricane Center map. And you see Dr., I don't know if he's a doctor, but Richard Reynolds is the name. And he came up with this methodology, and this goes for a week. This is a weekly average, whereas the NOAA-NESDA shot here, this is a snapshot from today, for example. But they're fairly close to each other. You can see, a large area of either neutral, neither warmer nor colder than it should be, or slightly below average. So we're not talking about 15 degrees colder than it should be, or whatever. But it does make a difference in the long run, and that's what the people at Colorado State and now a bunch of other institutions and private weather firms, they all have their opinions about what this will mean, and we're about to find out. That's we'll just sit back. It's like forecasting how the NFL season's going to be, or college basketball. Look at those preseason number ones, and I'm not even going to single anybody out, but one of my favorite teams, or really my favorite team, they were preseason number one, and look how that turned out. They got bumped out in the Elite Eight. Basketball and hurricanes have nothing to do with each other, but the analogy and the statistical references do. And it's very similar from time to time that, you get a setup, you think something may happen, and then something entirely different happens as things progress. So we'll wait and see. Bottom line, Gulf, Western Caribbean over here, slightly warmer, much so above normal in the subtropical Atlantic. And that's pretty far north, okay? So that'll be interesting. Maybe you folks up in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, the Canadian Maritimes, maybe this is a big season for you. We'll just have to wait and see. All right, now this is interesting because we're going to segue into what's happening out there now. The upper ocean heat content, this is how much energy is stored in the upper part of the ocean, what we call the tropical cyclone heat potential. And this is updated very recently. This is the 16th of May, so it's a little dated, but it gets updated often enough. And you see there's just one island out here of warmth, relatively speaking, of higher upper ocean heat content. The rest of the Atlantic Basin, the Gulf of Mexico, all out here in the subtropical Atlantic, and even most of the tropical Atlantic, not much in the way of extra high-octane fuel in the upper ocean heat content department. And that's important because the only area that it is over here, like I showed you, and this is where we'll be talking about potential development. What did it look like last year, the same time last year? That's what it looked like. So it is different this year, all right? Does that mean, well, everybody's safe? It's not going to be like last year, so thank goodness. Well, this year could be different. There's just no way to know, and we could talk about that for hours, but that's not helpful. Well, what we want to look at are the facts in front of us, and we see here, yes, there is a pretty big change from 2018 versus this same time last year. What will it mean in terms of overall activity? Well, that's a wait-and-see game. I hate to use that word game, but you know what I'm saying. All right, so as we get closer to the system in the Caribbean that was outlined by the Hurricane Center today, let's just review climatology one more time. This T-H-I-S-T, this time period, the end of May, the last third, typically we see a pretty good concentration of activity in the Southeast Pacific with a few areas here in the Western Caribbean. It's not supposed to be busy this time of the calendar year, which is outside, technically, by 10 days of the hurricane season for the Atlantic Basin. It's already hurricane season over here in the Eastern Pacific. I argue that it should all just begin May 1st or May 15th, and it's 7 months long and whatever, but that's not up to me. So this is what it should, this is our historical record. All right, so in the Eastern Pacific, lo and behold, there's nothing going on anywhere out here to even talk about. So we switch over to the Atlantic side, and yes, we do have an area. The National Hurricane Center outlined it this morning, and we can click on it and expand it. This is the broad view. Zoom in on it. You can clearly see, first of all, this big fetch of moisture coming up out of the deep tropics, tapping into this high moisture content area near the equator in South America. But the area of interest here, this little yellow X, basically, this is a big paragraph here. You have the interaction of a large upper level low with a weak surface trough. So there's that weird mixing again of two different features in the atmosphere battling each other. The large upper level low is going to be sitting down here with cold air high up in the atmosphere rotating counterclockwise, and then at the surface you've got this air coming together, this convergence of air coming in this way, and then you got this monsoon trough or this gyre trying to set up coming in from this way, and the whole thing's going to try to start turning, literally turning, and then maybe turning into something possibly, though I give it very low odds, that is worthy of a name. All right, subtropical storm, meaning that it's got a mix of mid-latitude storm features plus tropical features, so they call it subtropical, and it still gets the first name on the list, which is Alberto, or maybe purely tropical, where it's, you know, all warm core, concentrated winds around the center, even though it could be lopsided more than likely, and it would be, you know, tropical storm Alberto. But I think it'll be more of just a low pressure area in the Gulf with a lot of rain, and that's what I think is going to happen. Does that mean that's what will happen? Well, we'll see. So looking at the broad picture, these beautiful GO 16 images, this is the tap of moisture coming up, you know, across Florida. You can see there's some weak low pressure sitting up here, very evident in the cloud photograph. Lots and lots of cloud cover, lots of humidity. In my office here in southeast North Carolina, I mean, I'm telling you what, it is downright muggy. Unbelievable. Went to Five Guys with my wife and daughter for lunch, and we came out of that air conditioning into the mugginess, and it felt like August. It's like hitting that wall. Ugh. And you guys down in Florida, it's just been a deluge. And hey, in the Carolinas too, we got several inches of rain in the Wilmington area, flooding over the weekend. And so that is the big impact from this. We can share model pictures of hurricanes 7 days out and whatever all day long, and everybody can have their opinion about it. It's going to happen, it's not going to happen, the GFS sucks, the Euro's great. It's like competing sports teams. It's absolutely fascinating to watch from the sidelines. You know, it literally has become almost entertaining the way people talk about things, and they don't understand what they're looking at, and they think they got to cancel their vacation plans, and the world's coming to an end. You know, like from Ghostbusters when he says, you know, cats and dogs living together, mayhem, whatever. Well, just calm down and ask yourself, but what does it mean for me? I see all this floating around on my social media. What does it mean for me? I'm going to give you my thoughts, but I also want you to listen to other people in your area, your local television meteorologist, male or female, and that's a story for another day. And don't think that the females don't know any more than the males do. I saw something on Twitter about that recently. Listen to them, your local sources, your local National Weather Service. Allow the social media hype to get your attention. I think that's a positive thing because, goodness sakes, there's a lot of distractions out there. So let that be your alarm clock. Fine. We're never going to get rid of it. So let's live with it, adapt with it, and use it as an alarm clock. Ooh, I'm awake now. I need to pay attention to something. Now, who do I know that can tell me how this will impact me? I'm one of those people, but I'm not everything. Focus in on people that you can trust. Follow them on social media, and you'll know what to expect. So back off my soapbox, this tells me we can expect rain. That is a deep tap into the tropics, and overall low pressure in this area, mid-levels, upper levels, and at the surface with the surface trough. That tells me spread out energy all over the place, lots of rainfall from time to time, not everywhere, and that's going to add up over the coming days. That's going to have impacts. Is it going to consolidate into a tropical storm or something like that, where you have a wind field to worry about? I don't think so. I don't think so, but it might. So let's focus on the impacts, and we'll look through the models a little bit because they're available, and then we'll talk at the end about what to expect. So this is the GFS operational over the next, I think I clicked on 7 days, 850 millibar level. This is the area where you're watching. Do you see anything other than little green blobs in there, moving around, morphing around like little amoebas? Well, there they try to concentrate a little bit at the western tip of Cuba, and then on up into the Big Bend of Florida. Watch it again. Everything's spread out, nothing really that organized, not until the end near days 6 and 7. You can see the outline of this surface trough in here from time to time. All right, and then you see at the end there around day 7, and we'll just go to that, is when it comes into the coast. Now let's go back. So right here, that's about 5 days out. And I mean, look at it. Right off the coast of Florida, it's all weird looking, lopsided. You know, looks like a fish backwards or whatever. It's not round. It's not concentrated. So in terms of a big wind event, and then look at the wind field around it. Very large area overall with a blob in here. And so don't worry about this being a big wind maker, a big surge maker, but it's going to be a big rain maker for whoever this impacts. And that's what's very important to remember from this. Low pressure over warm water equals rain. All right? Don't worry about the other stuff. But also, please don't dismiss it. Well, if it's not going to be a tropical storm or a hurricane, I'm tuning out. Goodbye. Talk to me when there's a hurricane. Well, okay, that's all well and good when you get 8 inches of water in your house because it rained 26 inches overnight or over the weekend, and you live near a retention pond or a floodway or a canal or whatever. Honestly, we have to get away from, if it's not a hurricane, it doesn't matter. I should make a T-shirt about that. I mean, really, ask people. I've said this the last couple of updates. Houston, you know, in vicinity, can't even say it. Beaumont, Port Arthur, parts of Louisiana, right? Anywhere. The Carolinas, you know, some of the National Hurricane Center scientists are dealing with a lot of water just in the last several days. I want to emphasize the impacts. And if it's not wind or surge, it's going to be rain. You can guarantee it. One of those impacts will get you, even if it's not a named storm. So that was the GFS. This is the European. This model stuff. Model output coming from the INSEP site. Tax dollars at work. This is Levi Cowan at work and tropicaltidbits.com. This shows us the 500 millibar heights and the surface pressures, etc. This is initial. This is 24 hours out, if I can make it. 48, 72. You can start to see this lowering of pressure right down here overall. And nice ridge, though, building over the top. Good to see over the east. I'll take it. And then by day, 4? And then day 5, lower pressure towards the mouth of the Mississippi. Not that low, but maybe tropical storm strength before you look at that and go, oh, the Euro shows it, it's going to happen. Well, I've been doing some looking into that, and I have learned from reading about such things from people that I trust that there's going to be a lot of shear down here, a lot of southerly and westerly winds coming across, and the Euro doesn't do very well in high shear environments overall. So this may be overdone. So what's the answer? You know, Mark, you're saying the Euro might not be accurate, 5 days out, really? Well, it doesn't seem to do very well in high shear environments. So now we turn to the ensembles. That's all the model output, so to speak. Again, oversimplifying it. But instead of asking 2 people, the GFS and the Euro, what they think, let's ask 90 people or 60 people or 20 people or whatever. You get the idea, and you get a much better idea of what's going to happen. So if we look at the GFS ensembles, and I'm going to slide through this, first of all, the reds are positives, higher than normal, and the blues are lower than normal. And this is heights in the atmosphere versus the norm. That's the easiest way to explain it, I guess. And so if we move out through time, 48 hours, 72, 4 days, etc., So right around there between days 4 and 5 and then 6, 7, 8, what do you see in the southeast Gulf and the eastern Gulf, really? Blues, like a bullseye. The takeaway, not there's going to be some type of hurricane or something somewhere in there. Nope, that's not the takeaway. The takeaway is low pressure over warm water in the warm season equals lots and lots of rain. All right? So I can't make it any simpler than that. The biggest thing to expect from this is rain, and lots of it. Exactly where? Can't tell you. Going to have to just monitor the radar on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes 3 to 6 hours at a time, because these areas of energy or vorticity in the atmosphere can, spawn pretty quick and dump a lot of rain. But this gives us an idea from the Weather Prediction Center of a good deal of the southeast United States. Lots and lots of rain coming. Rivers are going to rise. Creeks will overflow. Travel over the busy Memorial Day weekend coming up going to be impacted. And that's where this matters, people. Okay? You're going to be driving on the interstate with a lot of other people trying to get somewhere, probably to the beach, and it's raining cats and dogs, and you're going 75 miles per hour, and the guy in front of you hits his brakes, and you're not paying it, whatever. You understand, and you have problems. So make sure you take it easy, all right? Because we definitely want you back next week to see what's happening. And that's a lot of rain over a lot of interstate and a lot of areas where people are going to be traveling. Look, today proves my point. A good part of I-95 corridor, the Turnpike, and a little bit of I-10 over here, some north of the Keys. It's going to be scattered, parts of I-10 over here. Your radar is going to be your best friend over the next few days. If you've got Radar Scope, use it. There are other radar apps out there, and keep up with it. Now, I will be doing videos every day this week. It's not like I'm disappearing for a week or anything. But this is the big setup. All of them are not going to be almost a half hour like this one. But this is setting it all up for the week ahead. Now let's monitor what goes on in the days ahead. And like I said, these will be much shorter, and we can focus on impacts as this thing does or does not develop. Something's going to happen, and there's going to be low pressure developing in the Gulf of Mexico. How organized and how much of a tropical look and characterization to it remains to be seen. And I can't get any more honest with you than that. That's all I know. All right? Don't forget, I'm on Twitter, at HurricaneTrack. You can support what I'm doing on Patreon. We're trying to grow that into, 1,000 or 2,000 patrons by the end of the year. That would be fantastic. Just $1 a month. Because remember, this is my job. I don't work as the manager at the local nuclear facility or whatever, and then I do this because I'm independently wealthy and I happen to have this as a hobby, or whatever. So your support matters, and it keeps me going, and I can do this for you and try to earn a living at it. All right, so speaking of earning a living at it, I'll be back tomorrow with more. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks as always for tuning in, especially when it's lengthy like today. I do appreciate that time. Hopefully you learned something from me. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.